So I just found out that I have undiagnosed schizophrenia and major trauma. No, trust me, I know. TikTok told me so. And that is the problem that I hear most people talking about today. TikTok tells us all sorts of things that we're diagnosed with. And so a wonderful question was arisen on the Discord server. Link in the description down below. While you're there, hit subscribe. But the question rose up, do I experience disassociation? And if you don't know, disassociation is when you kind of like feel outside of yourself. You don't feel like the world is real, those kind of things. Now, as I'm saying that, you may be thinking, oh my gosh, there have been times where I felt like the world wasn't real or I didn't feel like I belonged in my body. Yes, because disassociation is something that everybody experiences. Now, the problem though is people will describe the symptoms of dissociation and then be like, dissociation is one of the symptoms of schizophrenia or of major trauma or of some other thing, ADHD, major depression, anxiety, whatever. And it is a symptom of all of those. And there creates a lot of diagnosis confusion on the internet. And so today I'm going to clear that up. Do you have schizophrenia? Do you have disassociation? Let's talk about it a little bit. Of course, this is not a diagnosis, but it's a huge misconception on the internet. So we got into this conversation, right? Somebody was talking about having a disassociative experience during a time in their life. You know, hey, I went and did this thing and I started to disassociate. It triggered my trauma, which is yes, that is a disassociation. But it made me think and it made me ask the question because a lot of people talk to me about how they have this severe trauma and terrible complex PTSD, which may be true. Talk with a professional, get diagnosed, get some help. However, there is a big problem with people overdiagnosing themselves and causing some real confusion and causing those actual symptoms, those actual diagnoses of trauma, schizophrenia, major depression, anxiety to be overutilized. I think a great example of this is when people were talking about OCD. You're like, oh, I'm just a little OCD, or oh, I'm just OCD about that. That's not what OCD is. OCD is life crippling. And so people genuinely got offended because they're like, stop saying that. You're not a little OCD. You're just particular or stubborn or bossy because you want things to be a certain way. You can't just claim OCD as the reason that you do these things when you're not actually diagnosed with it. OCD is miserable, right? And there are some really talented and special individuals who have been diagnosed with OCD. One of them being Howie Mandel. There's a great podcast. Maybe I'll try and link to it, but a great podcast with Howie Mandel just released a couple days ago talking about his experience with OCD, and it's debilitating. He talks about how he could not live life without his medication. He would die because that mental health diagnosis is so crippling. And so this is where a lot of things kind of get into the weeds. So do you have disassociation? The probable answer is yes. Everybody experiences disassociation at some time in their life. So how do we know that you don't have schizophrenia or major depression or anxiety? Here's why. Let's start with the definition of OCD. We're gonna go to the book, right? Go to the book. DSM-5 criteria: depersonalization and derealization disorder. This is where you get those dissociative symptoms, right? Persistent or recurrent episodes of depersonalization, derealization, or both. Episodes of depersonalization and are characterized by a feeling. Here you go. Characterized by a feeling of unreality or detachment from or unfamiliarity with one's whole self or from aspects of the self. So if you've ever felt like you weren't yourself, like you weren't actually in your body, like you were separated from your real identity, that is an example of depersonalization. The individual often feels completely detached from their own being, and there may be a diminished sense of agency. The sense of agency means ability to control yourself, right? So feeling like you're not actually in control of your body would be another way to say diminished sense of agency. This is just psychology mumbo jumbo. So let's get nitty gritty, right? We talked about this experience of unreality, but what is derealization? Derealization, the second part of this dual diagnosis type thing here, is experiences of unreality or detachment with respect to surroundings. So one is detachment from your being, and the other one is detachment from reality. So depersonalization, D, coming from the Greek or the Latin, I forget which one, meaning away from your person. Depersonalization, derealization, away from reality. You feel separated from reality or you feel separated from your person. If you experience this, these are the two major symptoms of depersonalization, derealization disorder. Now, here's where people get confused, and here's where I need to make the huge distinction. You cannot, just because you have had symptoms of this, just because you've experienced this in your life, you do not qualify for the diagnosis. There's only 2 symptoms. And so check 1, check 2, you may meet both of those symptoms. However, there are criterion B through E that you have to meet in order for you to qualify for an official diagnosis. And this is where people get it wrong. And this is where people on TikTok will say, oh, well, I've experienced that, so you may have, and they use the keyword may, you may have depersonalization, derealization disorder. And yes, you may, but the likelihood is you probably don't, because criterions B through E, right? And this goes for every diagnosis. Every diagnosis, the most important thing, these symptoms, criterion C, cause clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. So if you've experienced depersonalization or derealization, but they have not caused you severe distress enough to be clinically significant, you need to go see a doctor because it's so bad. If it's not that bad, you don't qualify for the diagnosis. You have to meet criterion C. And this is where people get confused. And they'll be like, oh, I'm ADHD. No, you're not. You don't qualify for an ADHD diagnosis unless it's ruining your life. You don't qualify for depression unless it's ruining your life. Now, hear me out. It doesn't mean that that's not important. Attention, sadness, anxiety are all important things that you need to care for. But let's remember what diagnoses are. And this is how a clinician, a skilled clinician, should be making diagnoses. They have to impair that person's ability to perform basic human functions like interact with society, hold a job, or do other things like eating, drinking, having a romantic relationship, whatever. But let's look at the other ones. There's even more. So not only do you have to meet C, but you have to meet these other ones. During depersonalization or derealization experiences, reality testing remains intact. So you have to, even though you're experiencing one of these 2 symptoms, you still understand that you're living in reality. If you don't, it usually probably qualifies for schizophrenia over here. But let's look at D. The disturbances are not attributable to the physiological effects of a substance. So if you've ever gotten high on marijuana or taken a mushroom trip or dropped some LSD tabs, right? You don't qualify for the diagnosis. That was created artificially through a substance. So if you've ever smoked, you can sometimes feel like you've lost yourself, right? Or if you drink, sometimes you can feel like, whoa, I'm not even really here right now, man. That doesn't count either, right? And then finally, the disturbance is not better, and each one has these, by the way. Criterion E, the disturbance is not better explained by another mental disorder, such as schizophrenia, panic disorder, major depressive disorder, acute stress disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, or another dissociative disorder. And every diagnosis is going to have these. These are called alternative or differential diagnoses. These differential diagnoses are, hey, you can't be labeled with depersonalization, derealization disorder unless you've eliminated the possibility that you have schizophrenia or major depression, right? That's what's going to be key. So just to clear that up, right? And the reason that this all started was many people have experienced dissociative symptoms, right? And that's very normal. That's a part of the human experience. But if you experience it so much that you can't function, that's a problem. So for example, somebody was talking to me, a client or a user, whatever, we're going to keep it anonymous, right? But somebody was talking to me. I went into this situation, and during this situation, I experienced disassociation to the point where I could not advocate for myself. I could not speak up or tell people what I wanted or keep myself safe. That's a problem. That's clinically significant. That causes distress. You are not safe because you are so removed from reality because of the dissociative symptom that you can't speak up for yourself. That is disassociation. Now, there's some other things. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. Hypnotherapy causes you to lose touch with reality. It causes you to lose touch with yourself so you can float off into your thoughts and experience something else. That would also not qualify for a dissociative experience. Now, it is dissociative, but it's not diagnosable negative dissociative, right? It doesn't classify for the diagnosis. It is a dissociative experience. It's also just a hypnotic experience, but it's not meeting those B, C, D, E criteria in order to be a diagnosis, right? It has to be clinically significant and impair your life. So I hope that clarifies some things. I hope that makes sense. And this applies for all of those. Let me know what you think. What bullshit have you heard on the internet? What toxic TikTok nonsense have you heard? And what diagnoses have you been incorrectly labeled with? I'd love to know. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.